Okay, so I forget what number it is. I think it's number 6 that I'm recording today of the Tuner Tales, and this one is called Couscous. They will meet you at the airport, Mom said, as she held out a photograph of Grand-Père Bernard and his new wife, Mary. Tuner knew she couldn't remember faces, but she took the photograph and studied it. Worrying, she asked again, "Will they recognize me?" It had been 2 or 3 years since she had seen them, and they had seen her, and since that time she had gone to school and changed. She wasn't worried about the flight itself because Tuner knew she could think quietly by herself for a whole school day if she needed to, and the flight was only going to take an hour. It was the arrival and finding the right grand-père that unsettled her. She kept looking at the photo and then looking up quickly to project the image into the air before her. He was balding, wore glasses, and was always dressed in a light summer suit. Mary had strawberry hair like her other granny from Montreal. If she whipped up her eyes fast enough, maybe the image would hang in the shimmer before it melted away. But it wasn't working. Every time she forgot their faces, she had to look at the picture again. On the plane, the stewardess oversaw her. If she needed water or the bathroom or anything at all, maybe a 7-Up, she could ask. The safety procedures were very boring, and the map was mostly blue. The short flight meant they were barely in the air when they had to come down again. Though they landed in the capital city of the USA, Washington, D.C., the airport itself felt tiny. It wasn't her first time on a plane or in an airport, and Tuner felt a little confused because while the airport was the same as the ones she had been to before, it smelled strange. Down a long corridor with corrugated metal walls, passengers filed out, all tall and adult, in front of her, towards a crowd of faces pressing forwards against the velvet ropes. Tuner was clutching her photo, glancing down and up with each step, and recognized him. There was her grand-père and his wife, smiling and reaching out to her. Now she was here. It was an eventful week before Mom came down to join them. Tuner was to sleep in the guest room of Mary's sweet little house. She grew boxwood hedges that smelled wonderful to Tuner, though Mary said some folks were reminded of cat pee. That was silly to Tuner, who knew the smell of cat pee and human pee from the alleyways behind her apartment building at home. Boxwoods smelled green and spicy, and she loved them more and more as each year passed and she returned, in time for the subtle budding of new growth. Bernard had moved in with Mary after he divorced Tuner's grandmother, who lived in Hollywood, Florida. Mom had made sure that Tuner understood that Mary was not really her grandmother and that she should be called Mary. But while Tuner was hanging around after supper, Mary asked if she could be her grandmother too. Tuner had her own idea. "I can call you Mary, but no, you are my step-grandma. I can't call you grandmama because I have one already, and I also have a granny in Montreal. It's too hard to say step-grandma all the time." Tuner and Mary had an understanding from then on that her name, Mary, means grandmother. Soon Mary was going to take her to meet her mother, Tuner's step-great-grandmother, who was almost 100 years old. But before they could drive to Louisa County to meet Mary's mother, Tuner was going to go downtown to the beauty shop to help. Grand-père owned the beauty shop, a hair salon that also authored esthetician services and manicures. This was his second shop. The first had been in France. He kept the shop with Mary, who also worked there for a long time, while Anne-Marie, Tuner's real grandmother, had kept the big, beautiful house in Bethesda, Maryland. But now that things were settled for a few years, Anne-Marie had sold the big house and moved to Florida. That was the next place Tuner was going after Mom came to collect her at the end of the week. At the beauty shop, the manicurist painted Tuner's nails with little daisy flowers. Then, when her nails were dry, she helped by sweeping up all the hair that had fallen to the floor. So many customers, all the seats were full. Around noon, Grand-père took her to the lunch counter next door to eat French fries. Tuner was happy to twirl on the stool while waiting for her fries. "Grand-père, what do people put on their fries? Is it ketchup or mustard?" This was a test question to see if he would tell her the truth. But also, she kind of forgot because Mom hated ketchup and didn't let her eat it. And the thought of mustard on fries didn't seem too weird. Usually, she put vinegar on her fries, but her own line of questioning had cornered her. Grand-père had not answered directly, but had asked her a question in return. What do you think people should put on their fries? Mustard fries were tasty, but vinegar was better. After lunch, Grand-père had customers, and Mary was busy at the cash register. So Tuner played on the sidewalk out front, skipping over the cracks recklessly. Step on a crack and break your mother's back, she chanted. Finally, it was getting late, and the customers were out of the shop. Now it was Tuner's turn to sit in the twirly chaise while Grand-père Bernard curled her hair before they were going to go to the ballet. They had tickets to see the performance of Sleeping Beauty at the Kennedy Center for the Arts. Tuner wanted to hear the music swell up and around her, lifting her hair like mermaids' tresses in water. Daisy nails and freshly curled hair, wearing a blue summer dress, Tuner felt like a princess. All her bouncy impatience bulged through her facade, and she took her chance to mega twirl in the hairdressing chair when Grand-père had finished. He was only gone for a moment when she leaned out while twirling and whacked her head on the marble counter. Ouch! It felt like being punched in the head. She knew what that felt like. It felt like nothing, and then a burning wet feeling that spread out from the impact site to crawl across her face. She was crying. Mary was fluttering around her with a stinging ice to make it better, but Tuner would not let her near the lump. She wasn't bleeding, so they could still go to the ballet? No. This was the USA, and no one ever went to the doctor. In Washington, D.C., you had to pay for the emergency room. So instead, they were going for supper to keep an eye on her. This was okay with Tuner, who was very hungry after her big cry. This restaurant had white layered tablecloths, heavy cutlery, many glasses for water, wine, and 7-Up. Now that Tuner could read French, she wanted to choose from the menu herself. She read carefully, looking for food that she recognized. Mustard fries had not satisfied her. She was hungry and not hungry because food often made her feel sick, but then she saw it. Couscous. That is what she wanted. Mom made couscous all the time at home. She loved its tiny grains and the ocean of butter that she usually ate it with. She liked to put a round spoonful in her mouth and then use her tongue to squish the couscous against her palate before she chewed. The feeling of it spreading out in her mouth into an even layer of buttery bulgur made her insist, even though Grand-père didn't think she would eat it all. He warned her, couscous is a spicy dish. He knew it from experience because he had been to Tunisia with the French army. But Tuner had bumped her head and wanted couscous. The server brought her the meal, brimming and steaming in a giant bowl. Tuner was amazed. She had only ever had couscous with butter, and here it was covered in spicy stew. Caught in her pride and hunger, Tuner dug into her meal. She fished out the grains from the stew and found all the meat chunks. She devoured as much as she could before the spice stopped her. In time, Grand-père helped her eat it, and Tuner later realized he had planned on that. She would have to watch him closely because he often finished her food before she could come back to it. Supper had taken too long to eat, and she was disappointed not to go to the ballet, but the meal had been too big, hot, and spicy to eat quickly. They drove home to Mary's house in Maryland, about an hour away from the busy downtown of Washington, D.C. Grand-père said they had time to catch fireflies in the garden and made her a little lantern out of a glass jar with holes poked into the lid. Tuner stalked 3 fat flies in the dark, moist grasses and carefully picked herbs for the lightning bugs to eat. Tuner felt good when Mary tucked her in that night in the guest bed. It was a good little bed in a good little house, and she felt loved when she was there. And that is the end of the 6th story of Tuner with her grandparents in Washington, D.C. I hope you enjoyed it. Bark, bark, bark.